Well, as we continue on in our study of Proverbs, I just want to take a brief moment to point out what the sweatshirt that I'm wearing, and what it says on the sweatshirt is thankful, and it's Thanksgiving, Calvary Spokane 2025, and that's because every Thanksgiving, in preparation for Thanksgiving, we prepare dinners for families. And this year we're kind of excited because we're able to provide 355 dinners because the need keeps on growing every year, and they are complete dinners. I mean, they're not just a turkey, but they're all the side dishes and everything, because we find that many of the families who can't afford to buy a turkey also can't afford to buy the side dishes, and so even the desserts. So it's an opportunity to bless people. It's become such a joy to our congregation, and that it's amazing because the monies are always there. People are more than generous to provide, but it's also a great opportunity to share the love of Christ with people, and that's one of the things we just include a little message about why we're doing what we're doing, and invite them to seek after Jesus and find a church where they can grow and find a Christian family. So anyway, that's why I've got the sweatshirt on, and I'm pretty excited about it because it's coming up this week. But again, verse 23, where we've been looking at the passage, it says, "The prudent keep their knowledge to themselves, but a fool's heart blurts out folly." Now, when I first read this, I thought to myself, boy, I just got to keep my mouth shut and not say anything, and only speak when I am spoken to, and speak with only the limited amount of words, because I don't want to be proved to be a fool. Although sometimes I think I don't need any help proving that. But basically, what he's talking about here is that the prudent person is somebody who knows when to speak, and they know when to remain silent. In other words, they just don't go around displaying what they know or the information they have because they want the focus of the attention upon themselves. And that's really the problem, is that a lot of times when we speak with other people, we're speaking in such a way not to just simply communicate and connect, but we want to impress them. We want them to think that we are special and that we may be smarter than the average duck. And as a result, we kind of come across with this kind of inside information, if you will. One of the things a term the Bible calls that is gossip. Basically, we want to be the first to report everything, to tell other people about stuff. And I think that's really the success of things like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and other things, that people are rushing out there to be the first to tell you about what's going on. And they love the idea about spilling dirt on other people. And I would just simply say that the problem with spilling dirt on other people is it causes division. And one of the things that we saw earlier in Proverbs, where he said that one of the things that God hates is those people who create discord amongst the brethren, people who cause a divisiveness within the church. And it can be very subtle how people do that, because sometimes what we do is we share our burdens, we share our pain, we're reaching out to get people to be sympathetic to us, and what we do is we play the victim card. And we want people to go, oh, you feel so bad. And what you're doing really subconsciously is you're trying to remove the guilt of whatever happened or whatever caused what happened from your life, and to put it on somebody else, to get them to carry your heaviness. Now, this also is one of the common practices of what we call the narcissistic or sociopath personality. What they like to do is create what we call flying monkeys. They'll share with you how they've been done bad and they've been treated wrong, and their goal is to get you to go out and begin to publish their innocence and their victimization, and talk about how terrible somebody was, that you don't really know who they are. I had a conversation just last night where somebody says, well, I heard that so-and-so said so-and-so. And I said, well, who did you hear that from? Did you hear that from them directly? Or did you hear it from somebody who said they heard it? And the person stopped and said, well, yeah, I heard it from somebody who said they heard it. And I said, so you really don't know if that's the truth or not, because you've never taken the time to actually talk to that person and ask them if it's true, have you? And they said no. And you see, that's an easy thing for us to get caught up in, because, we all like little spicy details and little pieces of information and tidbits of rumors and so forth. And someone, I think my son said it to me one time, he said that in Christianity, gossip is the gospel. And I thought to myself, wow, that's a pretty profound statement. But for many people, it is. If somebody whispers something to me, that suddenly becomes the truth. And then I found that even when I'm doing research on various topics, I can't just take one article or one source and go with that. I have to really kind of do some background research. Is this really what's going on? Is this really what's happening? Because I see things like you do on the internet, Instagram. I don't use TikTok, although I'm on TikTok. That's kind of hypocritical, isn't it? Anyway, but the problem is I just find there's such an inundation of information, and I don't have time to go through all of it and figure out if it's true. But more importantly, there's many people who will just read something like that in a 3-second clip, and they'll go away believing that they've just seen a declaration of truth, when in fact, it may have a degree of truth. It may be representative in part, but it's not the whole story. And that's the problem. We oftentimes don't get the whole story because we're getting sound bites of information. That's one of the big problems we have in our culture today. It's not unique to us, but our ability to deliver gossip is greater than it's ever been in the history of the world because of this kind of digital media. So it really becomes incumbent upon us to be careful that what we're talking about, or we're saying things that we really kind of go to the source. Because I had a conversation recently where I said, somebody told me that this, and this is true. And they said, no, that's not true. That's not what happened. And there's a whole different context where somebody had misunderstood the context. I don't think they were trying to be mean. But nonetheless, this happens all the time, and it destroys relationships. It creates discord, that people start saying, well, I'll never listen to them or talk to them or be around them ever again because they're XYZ, and they haven't ever taken the time to really find out if it's true. And what happens is God will probably take care of them okay and bless them, but you get robbed of a relationship. You get robbed of a dynamic of interaction with that person because you've chosen to believe that. Now, in contrast, or I should say, in comparison, he goes on to talk about how the fool is somebody who proclaims or boils over, literally, broadcasts his foolishness to everyone. And that's really interesting because it's a person who talks way too much. They give you way too much information than you need. They have no filters. They have no sense of when something is over the edge. They'll share their opinions without even understanding what they're talking about. In fact, I find that was one of the things that was fascinating about watching Charlie Kirk in his debates, was that you found there are a lot of people who got up and said stuff that they had no idea what they were even talking about. And when he pointed out the inconsistencies, some of them apologized, some were humbled, and some got angry because they thought they were putting up themselves in a position to prove how brilliant they were, and in fact, they just proved themselves to be a fool. That's why sometimes you should never try to sound smarter than what you really are. In fact, I think we should all operate in the position that we probably could be instructed by people who know a whole lot more of us. But what it does is, when we speak about things that are above our understanding or our pay grade, as we often say, we really reveal how ignorant we are about various things. And so I found it fascinating many times when I discover somebody has an area of expertise or skill. I'd like to ask them questions and find out, how they do what they do, the way they do it. It's just really kind of amazing to me, because you realize that every one of us has these areas of personal expertise and opportunities that God's given us to grow and to be able to facilitate positive things. And we can all learn. And what causes us to have an appreciation for other people and the unique way in which God has crafted them. Foolish people never get that opportunity because they're too busy thinking about themselves and talking about themselves. That's why one of my favorite quips is somebody said, well, I'm tired of talking about myself. Why don't you talk about me for a while? And sometimes I have conversations with people. I think, this is what I feel like. You've been talking about yourself and now you want me to talk about you. And unfortunately, sometimes I say, yeah, I'll talk about you. Let me tell you what I think. And that's sometimes not really welcome. But anyway, it really comes down to what James said in James chapter 1, verse 19, when he says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. In other words, if you're dealing with a topic of substance, it doesn't mean just casual conversation. If people are saying, well, I should be quick to listen. I see people, I just say, hi, how are you doing? How's your day going? Or whatever. It's not talking about that kind of polite interchange that takes place. But when somebody says, hey, can I talk to you about something? Or this is on my heart. He says, be willing to sit and listen to what they have to say and really clarify what it is they're saying. And then secondly, choose your words very carefully, especially when you're talking about the direction you think a person should move when they're dealing with a difficult circumstance. And when you see them doing something that really looks really sick and wrong to you, rather than just simply angrily responding, be slow to come to that point of anger. And again, I've said this before, I said it last week in particular, that being angry is not always wrong. We should get angry about some things because they're really wrong. I mean, I got very angry at our former president when he talked about how that we should provide gender transformation, gender changing care for every kid who wants it. I thought that really made me angry. That's terrible advice. It's a blasphemous evil. And so I got very uptight about it, and I wasn't afraid to share with people. I said, that is evil. That is the definition of evil. And so I think that we should get angry at certain things, but we shouldn't let anger be the thing that gets us to say what we're thinking. We should not let anger be our first response. Only let anger be your response when it's the only necessary response to get people to pay attention to what they need to look at. Well, I hope that made sense. But anyway, God bless you, and we'll continue on tomorrow, Lord willing.